They said it like they meant it. Fly out, Nana. Thanksgiving won't feel the same without you. Those words kept playing in Evelyn's mind like a lullaby she desperately wanted to believe. So she did. She booked the flight. She pulled out the old ceramic pie dish she hadn't used in years. She laid her soft navy cardigan over the armchair, ready to pack it, thinking maybe, just maybe, she'd finally get to feel wanted. Not needed, not tolerated, but truly wanted. At the airport, standing under the glowing arrival sign at Gate 3A in Minneapolis, Evelyn waited. Her small suitcase rested beside her like an old friend, and her coat, warm and folded neatly, hung from her arm. Around her, the terminal buzzed with life. Kids holding glittery signs, families embracing like time had stood still just for them, laughter mixing with tears. Everyone was being claimed. Everyone but her. The flight had landed 42 minutes ago. She'd checked. Twice. Her eyes searched the crowd. Hopeful. Unsure. Then slowly sinking. She clutched her phone. The last message from her daughter-in-law, Karen, still fresh. We'll be there. The kids can't wait. Red heart. Evelyn had responded with trembling fingers. Landing at 3:10. Can't wait to hug everyone. No reply. Still she waited. Standing. Not sitting. Sitting felt too final. Like giving up. Like saying out loud what she refused to believe, that maybe she didn't matter as much as they claimed. Her phone buzzed. A flicker of hope. But it wasn't a call. Not even a text. Just a social media notification. She opened it with the faintest hope that maybe someone had posted a welcome message or a check-in. But there it was, a photo that sliced deeper than words ever could. Her son, Daniel, in the navy sweater she mailed him last Christmas. His wife, Karen, smiling wide, her tin glowing like she lived under a gentler sun. Their twins, Lily and Max, sitting around a polished table that gleamed with candles, turkey, mashed potatoes, and a golden pie that wasn't hers. The caption read, "Full house, full hearts. Happy Thanksgiving from our family to yours." Evelyn stared at the screen, trying to blink away the truth, trying to find a space. Any space at that table where she could have belonged. There was none. She didn't cry. Not then. She didn't let her face show a crack, not even when her knees trembled just a little. Instead, she slid on her coat, picked up her suitcase, and began walking. Past the families, past the couples, past the shuttle stop. She wasn't sure where she was going. Only that she wasn't going to keep standing where she wasn't wanted. 3 days earlier, Daniel had called. That should have told her something. He never called. Unless it was about a birthday, a forgotten bill, or a favor wrapped in sugar. "Hey, Mom, what are you doing for Thanksgiving?" His voice had that overly warm texture. Too polite. Too practiced. I was just going to stay home," she had said. "Roast a little chicken. Maybe bake a pie if my fingers cooperate. Watch an old Cary Grant movie. Nothing fancy." There was a pause, then the pitch-perfect line. "The kids were asking about you. We all want you here. It wouldn't feel right without you." It shouldn't have hit her so hard, but it did. It had been years since she'd felt welcomed. Sure, she'd been needed, called upon, asked for help, but not welcomed. There's a difference. So she said yes. Daniel didn't offer to book the flight or help pay for it, and Evelyn didn't ask. She pulled out the old envelope she kept tucked away behind her socks, the one with emergency money, saved from last Christmas. This felt like an emergency. She booked the ticket that night, nonstop, and even splurged on an extra $12 for a seat with more legroom. It felt silly indulgent. But she told herself, if I'm going to fly across the country to be with my family, I might as well do it with a little dignity. The next day she went shopping, not just for the grandkids, though she did pick up a book for Max about space and a glitter journal for Lily. She even grabbed a box of hazelnut truffles Karen once said she loved. But she also bought something for herself. A cardigan. Navy blue, soft and warm, with sleeves that draped gently and made her feel like she belonged in someone's memory. She packed 3 days early. Checked the weather. Took the trash out. Lowered the heat. Didn't tell her Thursday bridge group she was leaving. Didn't want to jinx it. Maybe that was foolish. Thanksgiving morning. She flew out. The airport was packed. People dragging bags, wearing hooded neck pillows shaped like animals, babies crying in strollers, coffee in every hand. Evelyn smiled at a toddler with pigtails and shared a brief glance with another older woman reading a paperback across the aisle. They didn't speak, but Evelyn felt a kinship. Women with stories carried in silence. When the plane landed, she smoothed her skirt, brushed the crumbs off her lap, and stepped out in her good shoes. Black leather, modest heel. She wanted to look like someone you wanted to pick up, and she believed she was, until she wasn't. The walk from baggage claim to the exit was heavier than she remembered. Not because of the suitcase. Something else weighed her down. She passed the kiosks, the smell of burnt coffee, the couples reuniting with joyful sobs. She watched a young woman leap into her boyfriend's arms and thought, how do you get that lucky twice in a life? Still, she waited. Waited because she still believed, even when the clock ticked past 3:40, even when her phone stayed quiet. Thanksgiving dinner probably wouldn't start until 5. Maybe they were running late. Maybe the turkey needed basting. Maybe the kids were fighting. She gave them a dozen excuses. But even harmless reasons hurt when you're standing alone in arrivals. Her knees started to ache. She sat on a nearby bench, hands folded tightly on her lap. She watched strangers get into cars that already knew their names. She saw a woman hand her elderly mother-in-law a hot chocolate and wrap her arms around her. Evelyn wasn't older than that woman, but she felt invisible in a way that made her chest hollow. Eventually she called. No answer. She left a message. Landed safe. Waiting outside door B, under the plane sign. Hope everything's all right. I'll wait a bit longer. But she already knew. Before she opened that app again. Before the photo loaded. Before the caption cut, like frostbite. This wasn't the first time Evelyn had been forgotten. It was just the first time she let herself admit it. She stood, pulled her suitcase behind her and walked. No destination. No tears. Just quiet, sharp realization, the kind that doesn't shout but shakes everything inside. She passed the rental car signs, the parking garage, the shuttle lines, and then just ahead she saw it, a squat building with fogged-up windows and a flickering neon sign. Maggie's Diner. The warmth inside glowed through the glass, dulled by little paper, turkeys taped up with Scotch tape. She stepped in. A bell above the door jingled. A waitress with tired eyes and a messy ponytail looked up and smiled. Happy Thanksgiving, sweetheart. Evelyn smiled back, her voice steady. You too. The booth she chose was by the window, where she could still see the gray sky and the taxis rolling by. Evelyn slid in slowly, her bones quietly protesting the long day. She laid her coat on the seat beside her and placed her small suitcase by her feet like it was something fragile. The waitress came over, handed her a plastic-coated menu and said, "Kitchen's a little slow today, but we've got turkey, mashed potatoes, and pie." Evelyn looked up, tried to smile politely. "Pie sounds nice." "What kind?" "Pumpkin. And some tea, please. Strong if you've got it." "You got it," the waitress said, scribbling something on her notepad. "I'll bring it out in a bit." Evelyn nodded and turned to the window. People still moved outside, but she didn't feel part of it. She watched a man load suitcases into the trunk of a cab. A woman laughed too loud as she answered her phone. There were lives happening all around her, but hers felt like it had been paused somewhere along the way. Her phone buzzed once on the table. She didn't turn it over. She didn't want to see another photo, another message pretending everything was fine. She wanted silence, just for a little while. The pie came, warm, a little uneven, the whipped cream leaning gently to one side. The tea was hot, just bitter enough to feel real. She took a bite. It wasn't perfect, but it was good. And for the first time that day, she didn't feel like she was trying. She wasn't performing politeness. She wasn't forcing herself to feel grateful. She was just there, with a slice of pie she didn't have to bake and a moment that belonged to no one else. She ate slowly, chewing each bite like it deserved to be remembered. She didn't scroll through her phone. She didn't check the time. She didn't wait for anyone to appear with an excuse or apology, because deep down she knew they weren't coming. Not today, maybe not ever. And still she was breathing. She was whole. She was there, under paper turkeys and fluorescent lights, letting the heat return to her fingers and the cold begin to fade. When the waitress came back with the check, she asked, "Want another slice to go?" Evelyn looked at her. The question felt strangely kind. It didn't carry pity, just an offer like warmth in a bag. "Yes," Evelyn said softly. "For later." The waitress smiled and winked. "Best decision you'll make all day." Evelyn smiled too, not because it was funny, but because maybe it was true. The little white bag dangled from her hand as she stepped back into the cold. Her suitcase bumped gently along the sidewalk behind her. She didn't have a plan. No hotel, no reservation. No one waiting to ask where she'd been. But she didn't feel lost. Not exactly. There was something quiet settling inside her, not peace, not yet, but a kind of stillness. The kind you feel when you stop begging people to care. When you stop hoping they'll remember. She walked slowly, the wind tugging at her scarf. Her shoes, the good ones she wore to look presentable, were not made for this much walking, but she kept going. A half-mile out, just past the rental car lot, she saw it, a low, square building with a flickering sign. Valley Inn. Weekly rates. Clean rooms. No pets. Not fancy. Not warm. But the lights were on, and that was enough. Inside, a man sat behind the front desk watching football on a tiny television. He barely looked up when she came in. "Need a room?" "Yes," Evelyn said. "Just for tonight. One person." He handed her a form. ID and card. She pulled out her wallet, handed him what he needed. Her cardigan still smelled faintly like the airplane. Her shoes were scuffed now. Her back ached from walking. But her hands didn't shake. "Room 114, he said, sliding a key across the counter. "End of the row." "Thank you." The room was exactly what she expected. Old. Clean enough. A bed with a heavy brown blanket. 2 mismatched lamps. A TV that looked older than her son, but it had heat, and a bathroom that worked. That was enough. She peeled off her shoes and sat at the edge of the bed. Her feet throbbed. Her shoulders ached. But her heart, the part that should have shattered hours ago, felt strangely intact. She looked at her phone. 3 missed calls from Daniel. 2 from Karen. 1 text. "Mom, where are you?" No apology. No explanation. Just confusion, as if she had forgotten them. She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled out the small notebook she used for grocery lists and thoughts she never said out loud. She flipped to a clean page and wrote, "I am not spare. I am not extra. I am not a side dish at someone else's table." She stared at the words. Then she underlined them. A year ago she would have cried. 5 years ago she would have called them back. But tonight no tears came. What came instead was clarity. Cold, clean, like stepping into winter air after being inside too long. It wasn't just this dinner. It was every little moment leading up to it. The skipped birthdays, the ignored voicemails, the invitations that felt more like chores than joy. She thought of Christmas 2 years ago when Karen had said, "We'd love to have you over, if it's not too much trouble getting here." The way the sentence hung, the way Evelyn had taken the bus, brought the ham. She remembered Daniel's 40th birthday, how she sent him an engraved wallet. He replied with a group message, "Thanks for the gifts, everyone." She remembered watching Lily's school play through a choppy live stream on her tiny laptop, a glass of wine in hand, and a lump in her throat. No one had told her about the performance. No one mentioned that they saw her online. But she had still shown up. Every time. Until now. Maybe it took standing outside an airport alone to finally see the shape of her place in their lives. She wasn't a part of their circle. She was a piece they remembered when it made them feel better. She looked around the motel room. Ugly, honest, functional. Maybe it was the most honest place she'd been in years. She got up, made a cup of tea using the motel's sad little coffee machine, sat cross-legged on the bed, and opened her pie box. She ate it slowly, using the plastic fork. No china, no tablecloth, just her and a slice of pumpkin pie. And it tasted like something she had finally earned. Evelyn didn't sleep much that night, but it wasn't the bed's fault. The blanket was scratchy, and the heater wheezed and clicked every few minutes like it was trying its best to stay alive. But even when her eyes closed, her mind kept walking. She heard the low coughs of someone in a nearby room, the echo of a toilet flush, the hum of traffic from the highway just outside. It wasn't peaceful, but strangely it wasn't sad either. It was honest. Around 2 a.m., she finally drifted off, the second slice of pie finished, her notebook still open on the nightstand. She didn't change clothes. She didn't unpack. She just slept, clothes and all, like someone who had nothing to perform for anymore. At dawn, her body woke up on its own. It always did. Even after retirement, even on holidays, her bones remembered how to be useful. She got up slowly, made another cup of bitter motel coffee, and watched the sky begin to turn pale through the cheap blinds. The room was still, like it was waiting for something. But Evelyn didn't feel like she was. Her phone buzzed at exactly 7:12 a.m. Daniel. The text read, "Mom, I'm so sorry. There was confusion about your flight. We thought you were coming tomorrow. Can you come to the house today? The kids really want to see you." No mention of the dinner. No mention of the photo. No apology. Just confusion and a soft nudge back into their version of normal. Evelyn stared at the screen, then placed the phone face down. She didn't answer. Instead, she got dressed, brushed her hair, dabbed on a little lipstick. Not because she was going to see anyone, but because she still got to decide how the world saw her, even if no one was looking. Down in the lobby, there was a bowl of bruised apples and a carafe of lukewarm coffee that tasted like it had been burning all morning. She took an apple, slipped it into her bag, and checked out. The man behind the desk didn't even glance up from his football recap. Outside, the air was sharp but not biting. The wind had calmed, and the sky above was clear, the kind of brittle, bright blue that only happens in November when everything feels thin and stretched. Evelyn didn't head to the airport. Not yet. She had something else to do first. A mile down the road, past a gas station and a boarded-up tire shop, she found it, a little postal annex tucked between two quiet buildings. The sign on the door was faded, and the inside smelled like dust and shipping tape. She stepped inside and asked the young woman at the counter for an envelope and a stamp. "Do you have one for Massachusetts?" she asked. "Sure do," the clerk said, smiling gently. Evelyn wrote the address from memory. Emma Wexler, 12 Pond Hollow Lane, Worcester, Massachusetts, 01609. Her granddaughter. Emma was Daniel's daughter from his first marriage, the only one who still called just to talk, the one who sent cat pictures and asked about recipes. She was in nursing school now. 23. Always thoughtful, always kind. Evelyn stared at the blank paper for a moment, then pulled a sheet from her notebook and began to write. "Emma, my love, you once told me I was your safe place. That meant more to me than almost anything anyone has ever said. This Thanksgiving didn't go how I imagined. I flew across the country for a seat that didn't exist. But something happened. In the silence and in the waiting, I remembered who I am when I'm not begging to be seen. I found a kind of peace I didn't know I'd lost. And I wanted to share that with you, not out of sadness, but out of truth." She folded the letter gently, slid it into the envelope, and sealed it with care, then handed it over with a $5 bill and a quiet "thank you." By 10:35, Evelyn had booked her flight home. Same airline, same gate, different woman. The flight wasn't until evening, so she wandered into a nearby cafe, small, cozy, with big windows and scones that looked too pretty to eat. She ordered tea and sat by the window for hours, letting her pen move slowly across her notebook, writing things she had never said out loud, thoughts that had waited years for permission. She didn't call Daniel, didn't text Karen, didn't explain where she was. They would see the missed calls. Maybe they'd wonder. Maybe they wouldn't. But for once, she wasn't waiting on their response. Around 4 o'clock, the light outside changed, golden and soft, the kind that made even the parking lot glow like a photograph. Evelyn watched a little boy run toward a van, backpack bouncing. Then he turned and ran back toward a woman, his grandmother, and grabbed her hand. She watched them until they disappeared into the crowd. Then, under her breath, not angry, not bitter, just clear, Evelyn whispered, "I deserved that too." The flight home was half empty, a blessing. She had the whole road to herself. She sat by the window, but didn't rush to fold her coat or buckle her belt. For once, she didn't feel the need to tidy herself up for anyone else's comfort. A flight attendant smiled kindly as she handed Evelyn a cup of water. "Heading home or leaving it?" she asked. Evelyn looked up, her face soft, her eyes tired but focused. "Both," she said, "in a way." The attendant nodded, then moved on without another word. That small understanding, quiet and respectful, meant more than Evelyn expected. As the plane lifted into the sky, Evelyn looked out at the city below, the runways crossing like scars, the rooftops shrinking into shapes too small to recognize. The world beneath her grew smaller, but something inside her grew steadier. She thought maybe she'd feel grief again. Maybe she'd cry once more. But it didn't come. Not this time. Not even during takeoff. What she felt instead was stillness. Not peace. Not yet. But something rooted. Present. Real. Halfway through the flight, she turned on her phone. A flood of notifications. For texts from Daniel. One voicemail. "Mom, I'm really sorry. Please call. The kids were asking about you. Karen said she thought you knew we moved dinner up a day. Can we talk?" Evelyn didn't open the voicemail. She didn't delete it either. She let it sit there. Let it wait the way she had waited. Then she turned the phone off again. When they landed, it was already dark. The shuttle to the parking lot was nearly empty. An older driver with a cap and a kind smile asked if she'd had a good trip. Evelyn smiled and said, "Not exactly, but I think I found something better." She didn't explain. He didn't ask. At home, the porch light was still on. She had left it on out of habit, expecting to return tired and full, folded into the warmth of family. Instead, she came back with a half-empty bag, a quiet mind, and something new in her chest. Not heartbreak. Something sharper. Something clean. The house smelled like lavender and old wood. Familiar. Honest. Hers. She took off her coat, hung it neatly, placed her suitcase by the stairs, moved slowly, not because she was tired, but because every step now felt deliberate. She boiled water, made chamomile tea, sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Daniel once spilled gravy, where Emma once cut snowflakes from napkins, where Karen once scrolled through her phone instead of meeting Evelyn's eyes. She looked around the room like it belonged to someone she was just now getting to know. Then, calmly, she opened the drawer beside the fridge, the one labeled Family, the one with the folders. She pulled out Daniel's. It was thick. Old receipts, bills she'd paid, tuition letters, a mechanic invoice from 2013, a deposit she'd sent for Ruby's preschool with a note in Karen's handwriting. "We'll pay you back after the bonus hits." They never did. Evelyn turned each page like she was touching something already healed. Not in anger. Not even in sadness. In truth. Then she pulled out Emma's folder. It was thinner. Handwritten thank you notes. Photos. Her graduation announcement. A little card with pink flowers that simply said, "I love you, Nana." Evelyn stared at it a long time. Then she reached for her notebook. This time she didn't write feelings. She wrote a plan. The next morning, Evelyn was waiting at the bank even before the doors opened. A light layer of frost covered the concrete steps, making them slick. She took her time walking up, one careful foot after the other, wearing her oldest, sturdiest boots and the same soft navy cardigan from her trip, the one she had bought to feel like she belonged. It didn't match her scarf, but she didn't care anymore. She wasn't dressing to please anyone now. She was dressing for action. Inside, the bank smelled like printer ink and floor polish. Familiar. Too familiar. The young teller behind the counter gave her a polite smile, the kind people reserve for someone they assume is fragile. "Good morning, Mrs. Ray," he said. "I need to speak to someone about my accounts." "All of them," Evelyn replied, her voice calm. "Of course," he said, glancing at his screen. Then he called into the back and asked someone to come out. A few minutes later, a woman appeared, neatly dressed, early 30s, confident posture. Her name tag said Natalie. She looked like the kind of person who kept almonds in her purse and never missed a workout. "Hi, Mrs. Ray, I'm Natalie. Let's step into my office." They walked past a row of desks into a small room with soft chairs and a glass door. Natalie offered her a seat and asked, "What can I help you with today?" Evelyn sat down and folded her hands at her lap. "I want to stop all automatic payments. Every single one. Starting now." Natalie blinked, but didn't speak right away. Then she turned to her computer and started typing. "That's quite a few," she said after a moment. "Recurring transfers to family members, tuition payments, car insurance, some scheduled donations." "Keep the donations," Evelyn interrupted. "Stop the rest." Another pause. Natalie looked at her, a little more directly this time. "Would you like to talk about why?" Evelyn met her gaze and said simply, "No. I've already spent enough time explaining myself." To her credit, Natalie nodded and didn't push further. She turned back to her screen and clicked through the tabs with quiet focus. Evelyn sat there, watching the world through the glass window, a woman buckling a child into a car seat, a man pushing a walker, a delivery truck idling too long in a red zone. Life still going. "All set," Natalie finally said. "Everything's been suspended. If you decide to come back and make the changes permanent, I can prepare the paperwork for full cancellations." "I will," Evelyn said. "There's also a power of attorney on file," Natalie added carefully. "Gregory Ray. Would you like him to still have access to your accounts?" Evelyn didn't flinch. Her voice was steady. "No. Revoke it." Natalie didn't look surprised. She printed a form and passed it across the desk. Evelyn signed it with hands that didn't shake. By the time she walked out of the bank, the frost had melted. The air had warmed just enough to soften the edges of the morning. Evelyn didn't rush. She took the long way home, stopped by a bakery on the corner, bought herself a fresh roll. It wasn't about punishing Greg. It was about finally drawing a line. A real one. Because love couldn't survive on sacrifice alone. It needed light. It needed truth. She had tried too long to grow something in the dark. Back home, she washed the pie dish she had packed for the trip, rinsed it gently, dried it with a towel, and placed it back where it belonged. Maybe one day she'd bake another pie. Maybe not. But it wouldn't be for people who left her standing on the curb. That afternoon, Evelyn called her lawyer. Mr. Altman had been her attorney for over 30 years. He had helped her and her husband buy their home, helped settle her husband's will, helped draft her own the year she turned 60. His voice on the phone was warm but cautious. "Mrs. Ray," he said, "what can I do for you?" "I'd like to make some changes to my estate," she said, "and I want to create a trust for my granddaughter." Mr. Altman didn't ask why. He didn't need to. He'd been doing this long enough to recognize the sound of a heart that had been disappointed one time too many. They set a meeting for the next morning. When Evelyn hung up, she didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel victorious. She felt clear. That evening, She sat on the porch with a blanket around her shoulders and a cup of tea growing cold beside her. The street was quiet. A few neighbors passed by. One waved. One didn't. She sat there, listening to the small, ordinary noises of her neighborhood. And for once, she wasn't hoping for anything more. She wasn't okay. Not yet. But she was steady, like she had finally stopped knocking on a door that was never going to open. The next morning, the sky hung low and gray, the kind of gray that makes the world feel wrapped in cotton. Evelyn took her time getting dressed, not because she was tired, but because she didn't want to rush what came next. Mr. Altman's office was in a little two-story building with green shutters and a crooked front step. The same family photos still lined the walls, though his children were grown now, and his bulldog had passed years ago. The building smelled faintly of floor polish and old paper. When she walked in, he stood up just like he had every time before. "Mrs. Ray," he said, offering his hand. "It's good to see you. And you, Mr. Altman." They sat across from each other, leather chairs, a ticking clock on the wall, and a stack of clean forms between them. His glasses had gotten thicker since she last saw him, and his mustache was now snow white instead of salt and pepper. "What are we changing today?" he asked gently. "My will," she said, "and I want to establish a trust. Everything I own, every cent, every asset, I want it protected and passed to Emma. Only Emma." Mr. Altman didn't raise his eyebrows. He just nodded slowly. "I assume we're removing Gregory and Karen." "Yes," Evelyn said. "They've had enough for me. More than enough." He wrote without comment. "I want it airtight," she added. "No loopholes. No surprises. Emma is the beneficiary. She gets everything when I'm gone. And until then, she can use the trust for school, rent, health care, or any emergency." "You'll decide what counts as an emergency." "Yes," she said. He smiled a little. "You've thought this through." "I have." "And your house, the pension, the CDs. If it has my name, it moves to the trust." He tapped his pen on the pad gently. "And you want full control while you're living." "Exactly." He leaned back. "Emma's a good girl. She's the only one who still sees me as a person, not a purse." There was a tightness in her throat as she said it, but she didn't look away. Mr. Altman didn't flinch. He just nodded. "Then let's make sure your wishes are honored." For the next hour, they went through everything. He asked questions. She gave firm answers. No more maybes. No more soft excuses. No more benefit of the doubt. When they were finished, he gathered the papers into a folder and looked at her like a man who had seen too many people wait too long to speak for themselves. "I'll have the final draft ready in a few days," he said. "We'll get it notarized and it'll be official." "Thank you," Evelyn said, and she meant it. Outside, the cold air was fresh. She walked home slowly, picked up a small poinsettia from the flower shop. Something red, something alive. Back at the house, the moment she stepped through the door, the phone rang. A number she didn't recognize, but she answered anyway. "Grandma!" came the voice on the other end. It was Emma. Her voice was shaky, nervous, full of warmth. "I got your letter." Evelyn sat down at the kitchen table. "You did." "I didn't know what happened. Dad and Karen said you canceled your flight last minute. They made it sound like you just changed your mind." "Of course they did. I was there," Evelyn said softly. "I landed. I waited. I saw the pictures." There was silence on the other end. Then Emma whispered, "I'm so sorry. I didn't know." "I know, sweetheart. That's not on you." "I should have called. I should have checked. You didn't do anything wrong. You're not the one who made that choice." Emma sniffled. "I missed you so much that day. It didn't feel right without you." Evelyn felt her eyes burn, but the tears didn't fall. "Not this time." "Thank you," she said. "That means more than you know." There was another quiet pause. Then Emma said, "Can I come visit next weekend? I've got a break from classes. I can take the train." Evelyn smiled. Her heart felt like it had been wrapped in something soft. "Of course," she said. "The guest room's ready." "I'll bring the chessboard," Emma said. "You still play?" "I never stopped." They said goodbye a few minutes later. Evelyn sat at the table, her hand still resting on the phone. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel forgotten. She felt seen. That Saturday, just after noon, Evelyn stood at the small train station on the edge of town. She had bundled up in her warmest coat, the one with the deep pockets and soft lining, the one that made her feel like someone who still mattered. In her hands, she held a paper bag with a sandwich and an apple, just in case Emma hadn't eaten during her trip. The platform smelled like cold rain and old metal. The wind tugged at her scarf, but she didn't move. She kept her eyes fixed on the spot where the 11:37 from Worcester would arrive. And then, through the glass of the train car, she saw her, Emma. She wore a big gray hoodie and jeans, her dark curls tucked into a beanie, a worn canvas bag slung over one shoulder. She looked older than Evelyn remembered, older and also stronger, like the world had tried to chip at her and failed. Emma stepped off the train, turned once, and her face lit up the moment she saw her grandmother. She didn't wave. She didn't hesitate. She just ran. And when she reached Evelyn, she wrapped her arms around her. Tight, solid, real. "Hi, Grandma," she whispered into her shoulder. Evelyn closed her eyes. "Hi, baby," she whispered back. "You're here." The drive home was quiet, not the uncomfortable kind, just calm. Emma looked out the window, as if she was trying to memorize the streets again, like she wanted to carry them with her. Evelyn drove slowly, not just because of the snow patches on the road, but because she wanted Emma to take in every detail. The neighborhood looked the same, but with Emma beside her, it felt new again. At the house, Emma set her bag down in the guest room like she had never been gone. She moved through the rooms with the same soft confidence she had as a child, the kind that says, "This is still mine." Evelyn made them both tea, and they settled on the couch with the chessboard between them. They played one game. Emma won, then another. Evelyn won that one, fair and square. Later, they sat at the kitchen table. The poinsettia Evelyn had bought still stood in the center, its red petals catching the light. Emma traced the rim of her mug with her finger. "I read your letter again on the train," she said quietly. "I've never seen you write like that before." "I've never had to," Evelyn replied. "I used to think being quiet was a kind of grace, that it made me easier to love." Emma looked up, her eyes serious. "I never ignored you." "I know." There was a pause, a heaviness in the air, not heavy with pain, but with honesty. "Dad doesn't know I'm here," Emma added. "I figured. He called the other night, asked if I'd talk to you. I didn't lie. I just said we hadn't connected yet." Evelyn gave a soft nod. "That was kind." Emma shook her head. "It wasn't kindness. It was exhaustion. I'm tired of pretending things are normal." That surprised Evelyn, not because she disagreed, but because Emma had always been the gentle one, the peacekeeper. To hear her say that now, with calm certainty, made something shift in Evelyn's chest. "You don't have to pretend here," Evelyn said. Emma looked at her. "Neither do you." They sat in silence for a while, sipping tea. It wasn't awkward. It was full, like there was too much between them for words to carry. And for the first time in weeks, Evelyn realized something. She wasn't angry anymore. She didn't need Daniel to call. She didn't need Karen to explain. She didn't want apologies or excuses or last-minute invitations that always sounded more like guilt than love. She had this, her house, her granddaughter, her quiet, her strength. That evening, Emma offered to cook. She made pasta with garlic and spinach. Evelyn grated cheese while they talked about silly things, a funny professor, a stubborn cat, how Emma had once dyed her hair purple and regretted it 5 minutes later. After dinner, they watched an old movie and laughed too hard at jokes that weren't really that funny. Before bed, Emma sat beside Evelyn on the couch and said, "Grandma, I don't want to lose you." Evelyn smiled gently. You won't. Promise. I can't promise forever, but I'm not going anywhere yet. Emma leaned in and hugged her, softer this time but no less real, and Evelyn let herself lean into it, not as someone who was being held up, but as someone who could finally rest. After Emma went to bed, Evelyn stayed in the living room for a while. The clock ticked softly behind her, steady and calm. She looked at the pictures on the mantel. Some were faded now. Some frames were empty, but one stood taller than the rest, a photo of her holding Emma as a baby. Her hair was darker then, her arms stronger, but the way she held Emma in that picture, fierce, proud, protective, it hadn't changed. She stared at it a long time. Then she turned off the lamp and went to bed. The next day, Emma left in the afternoon. They lingered on the porch for a while, saying little. Evelyn handed her a container of leftover pasta, a scarf she had knitted the previous winter, and a kind of quiet love that didn't need words. Emma kissed her cheek. I'll call Tuesday. I know you will. She climbed onto the train, turned once, and gave a small wave through the window. Evelyn waved back, her hand resting in the air long after the train had gone. The house felt quieter than usual, but not in a lonely way. It was the kind of quiet that comes after something has been said that needed saying. She moved slowly through the rooms, picked up their mugs, folded the blanket from the couch, placed the chessboard back on the shelf. Then she returned to the drawer. Greg's folder still sat thick and full. Emma's was still light, but this time Evelyn wasn't just thinking about them. She was thinking about herself. She pulled out a yellow notepad and began listing everything she had paid for over the last 15 years. Not just checks and bills, but the quiet things, the things she never got credit for. Legal fees, house repairs, groceries when Karen didn't feel like shopping, school fundraisers she supported because her presence was always optional, but her money never was. Line by line, she wrote them down. By the time she finished, it filled 4 pages. She hadn't thought of herself as generous before, just useful, reliable, the person who showed up, because that's what mothers do. But as she looked at the list, she saw it clearly. She had been subsidizing their lives, and in return, they had given her politeness, hollow birthdays, tired smiles, a chair near the coat rack instead of at the table. She wasn't angry. She was just done. At 3:17 that afternoon, Evelyn's phone rang. She looked at the screen, Daniel. She let it ring. A minute later, a voicemail appeared. Then a text. Hi, Mom. Just checking in. Hope everything's okay. Let me know when you're free to talk. There was no urgency in the message. No mention of Thanksgiving. No acknowledgement of what had happened. Just that soft, vague way people speak when they don't want to admit something has gone wrong. As if nothing had happened. As if she hadn't stood outside an airport with a suitcase in hand, watching her family laugh around a table she wasn't invited to. Evelyn deleted the voicemail without listening. She left the text unread. That evening, as the sun sank behind the rooftops and the house filled with shadows, she lit a candle. Not for anyone else, just for herself. For the stillness. For the light catching on the kitchen counter. For the peace she had started carving out, one quiet moment at a time. She opened a bottle of wine she had been saving for a holiday. One of the good ones. She poured a glass, set a single place at the table, and warmed up the leftover soup from the night before. She didn't scroll her phone. She didn't wait for it to ring. She sat with herself. Later, she opened her email and scrolled through the folder labeled Travel. Near the bottom, she found the receipt for her Thanksgiving flight. Round trip. Return complete. She forwarded it to herself. Then added a note in the subject line. Proof of departure and return. No rescue. No reunion. Just me. She didn't send it to anyone else. She didn't need to. The next morning, she called Mr. Altman again. I've been thinking, she told him. I want to add a clause to the trust. Of course, he replied. What are you thinking? I want Emma to be the sole executor, But I also want to attach a letter, not a legal one. A personal one. You can include a statement of intent, he said. It won't change the legal structure, but it can help explain your reasons. Good, she said. Then I'll write it. That same morning, she sat at her kitchen table, the same place where she had once folded napkins into swans, where she'd written birthday cards, where she'd waited for phone calls that didn't come. And she began to write. To whoever is reading this after I'm gone. If you're wondering why things were divided this way, let me say clearly, this is not punishment. It's honesty. I have spent most of my life giving. Quietly, without being asked, without needing thanks. But love without respect isn't love. And presence without care isn't family. I chose the one person who saw me before I disappeared, who showed up without needing anything from me, who remembered me without a reminder. She didn't finish the letter that day. Some things deserved to be written slowly, carefully, with meaning in every line. Tuesday came and went without a call from Emma, not because she forgot, but because they had agreed on it. Emma had clinicals all week and didn't want to be distracted. I'll call Friday, she had said, after my shift. Same time. I promise. Evelyn trusted her. That morning, though, someone else called. Karen. Her name lit up Evelyn's screen like a warning sign. Bright letters. Cold timing. Evelyn let it ring until it stopped. 30 seconds later, a text arrived. Hi, Irene. Hope you're well. Greg mentioned you've been hard to reach lately. Let's catch up soon. No warmth. No punctuation where it mattered. Just a casual practice line that sounded more like a co-worker checking in than a daughter-in-law reaching out. Catch up. That stung more than it should have. They had 15 years between them. Evelyn had helped Karen get her first real job after Lily was born. She'd sent baskets when Karen had gallbladder surgery, paid for Karen's mother's funeral flowers when they didn't have the money, and now she was just someone to catch up with. Evelyn didn't respond. Later that afternoon, as if on cue, another message came in. Mom, Meline tried calling. We're starting to get worried. Can you just let us know you're okay? The irony of it all. They hadn't been worried when she stood alone outside arrivals, when her calls went unanswered, when they posted a photo with a caption that read full house and left no chair for her. Now they were worried, because silence, real silence, was loud. People who rely on your yes, your softness, your quiet understanding, they don't know what to do when all they get back is nothing. That evening, Evelyn went up to the attic, not because she wanted to escape, but because she was looking for something. An old recipe book, the one Emma had once asked about, the one with the apple crisp scribbled in the margins. The attic smelled like dust and old wood. The boxes were worn, the insulation curled at the corners. She opened one marked 1990 to 2005. There it was, the book. Underneath, she found more than she expected. Old letters, birthday cards from Greg when he was a teenager, stick figure drawings from Emma when she was small, thank you notes from friends who had long since moved away, a photo of her late husband in his Sunday suit, holding a pumpkin pie with a proud grin on his face. Evelyn sat down cross-legged on the attic floor, her knees aching, the cold seeping through her pants. She let the memories settle into her lap like folded laundry. She thought about Greg as a boy, how he used to press his ear to her chest during thunderstorms. Your heart's louder than the rain, he'd once told her. She thought about how he'd cried when she left for work, how he used to get confused by shoelaces until she taught him to use 2 loops instead of 1. She had loved him completely. Maybe she still did. But love doesn't cancel out neglect. And forgiveness doesn't always mean return. She carefully placed the letters back in the box, closed the lid, and stood slowly. That night, when the house was dark and the air heavy with silence, she opened her notebook again, and she wrote 2 final lines for the letter attached to the trust. Emma, you saw me not because you had to, not because I gave, but because you chose to. That's what family is. Choice. respect, truth. The pen felt heavier than usual in her hand, but she wrote it anyway. The next morning, Evelyn drove into town with purpose. The roads were quiet, the sky a soft gray that hung low over the rooftops. She didn't rush. There was no pressure to be anywhere. No one waiting. Just a list in her bag, folded neatly next to the documents Mr. Altman had prepared. The letter, the trust, and her name, steady at the top of every page. The notary office was tucked in the back of a small shipping store. She passed shelves stacked with bubble wrap, envelopes, and novelty greeting cards that tried too hard to be funny. The scent of toner and cardboard filled the air. A man stood behind the counter. He had kind eyes and hands that moved with slow, deliberate care. His name tag read Dev. "I need to notarize a letter," Evelyn said, her voice firm but calm. "And these trust documents." He looked at the papers, then at her. "Big changes." She nodded. "Long overdue ones." Dev didn't ask anything else. He guided her through each signature, pointing quietly to where she needed to mark, making sure everything was done just right. When it was finished, Evelyn felt lighter. Not free. Not yet. But like something had been removed from her shoulders. Like she could finally exhale without guilt clinging to the end of her breath. She stopped by the grocery store afterward. Picked up milk, a bag of oranges, a bundle of lilacs on sale. Half price, already wilting a little around the edges, but still beautiful. The kind of thing you buy when life feels settled again. When you stop waiting for someone else to hand you your piece. At home, she placed the lilacs in a chipped vase near the kitchen sink. The scent crept slowly into the air, filling the space like a soft reminder that some things bloom even when no one is watching. She put away the groceries, folded her coat over the back of a chair, and just as she reached for the kettle to boil water, her phone buzzed again. "Greg, Mom, we really need to talk. You're not answering and it's making things worse. I don't know what's going on, but we're worried. Please call me." It was longer than his usual messages. She could feel the edges fray, the panic underneath. But there was still no real apology. No ownership. Only the weight of her silence pressing back against years of being quiet. He wasn't sorry for forgetting her. He was sorry she had stopped filling in the blanks. Evelyn stared at the message, then turned off the phone. That afternoon, she pulled out the folders one more time. Greg's, Emma's, the trust. She slid them into her fireproof box, locked it, and placed it beneath her bed. Not to hide them, but to mark the end of the explaining. She was done asking, done hoping, done waiting. That evening, she made soup, lentils, carrots, garlic. The kind of meal her hands remembered how to make without needing to measure. She didn't cook out of tradition or obligation. She cooked for herself. She set one place at the table, not with grief, but with intention. Not mourning, just respect. For herself. The soup was warm, comforting. It reminded her of nights when she used to feed everyone else first and take what was left after. But tonight there was no waiting. After dinner, she stepped onto the porch, wrapped herself in a shawl. The night was cool, the breeze just sharp enough to feel like it belonged to a changing season. The street was quiet. A few porch lights glowed. A car turned the corner. A dog barked once, then went silent again. She sat still, the cup of tea between her palms cooling slowly. And then, out of nowhere, a memory returned. Greg had been 10. He came home with a split lip, mud on his jeans. Another boy had pushed him during recess. He didn't cry, just stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing his hands in silence, blood and dirt mixing in the water. "It's fine," he'd said. "It's nothing." She had knelt beside him, wiped his chin, and said, "You're allowed to be hurt. It doesn't make you weak." And now, years later, Evelyn realized she should have said that to herself too, because she had been hurt, quietly, repeatedly, and she'd let it happen because she thought patience was strength, that endurance was grace, but it wasn't, not always. Sometimes it was just delay. Sometimes it was just the cost of silence. She sipped her tea, let the air press in around her. Inside, the lilacs swayed near the window, a blur of purple behind the glass. Somewhere nearby, a laugh echoed, sharp and bright, like it belonged to a different life. And Evelyn sat in hers. No questions, no waiting, just the quiet weight of her own presence. Finally whole. It was late Friday afternoon when the knock came. 3 soft taps on the front door. Not the mailman, not a neighbor. The kind of knock that carries hesitation behind it. Evelyn opened the door. Karen. Her hair was too perfect, curled just right, sprayed into stillness. She wore heels too thin for the uneven sidewalk. Her coat hung from one shoulder, and a leather tote bag sat high under her arm. Her face had that practiced expression Evelyn had seen many times, part concern, part performance. "Irene," she said, her voice almost sweet. "Can we talk?" Evelyn didn't speak. She simply stepped aside and let her in. Karen walked through the house like she was waiting to spot something out of place. But everything looked the same, except the air. The air had changed. Evelyn led her into the living room. Karen sat only after Evelyn did. She placed her tote on the floor, folded her hands in her lap. "I know you're upset," she began, smoothing her tone like a wrinkle. "And I just want to say, this whole thing, it's been a huge misunderstanding." Evelyn said nothing. Karen pushed on. "Greg thought your flight was Friday. That's what he told me. We didn't realize you had already landed." Evelyn looked at her, calm and unblinking. "And the photo?" Karen's eyebrows pulled together. "What photo?" "The Thanksgiving photo, with the caption, 'Full House.'" Karen's eyes dropped to the floor. "That was just a post. A holiday thing. I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did," Evelyn replied. Karen looked up too quickly. "Well, yes, but I think we need to move past that now. The kids miss you. Greg's been calling. We're all just concerned. You've shut us out." Evelyn took a slow breath. "No, I just stopped filling in the silence for you. That's different." Karen's mouth tightened. "We want to make things right." Evelyn looked at her fully, really looked, at the too shiny lipstick, the nervous fingers, the way her knee bounced slightly, betraying her practiced calm. "You didn't come to make things right," Evelyn said. "You came to see if I'm still useful." Karen straightened. "That's not fair." "But it's true." Karen's eyes flicked toward the hallway, as if hoping Greg might appear and take over. Evelyn continued, voice level. "I've given enough, more than enough, and I've already decided where the rest of it goes." That caught her. Her lips parted just slightly. "I'm not angry," Evelyn added. "I'm not bitter. I'm simply finished." Karen's tone shifted, tightened. "This isn't like you." "I know," Evelyn said. "It's like me now." A silence stretched between them. Then Karen asked, "Does Greg know you've made changes?" "I imagine he's starting to suspect." Karen's gaze narrowed. "And the house? Your accounts? All taken care of." Another silence, a deeper one. Finally, Karen reached for her tote and stood. "Well," she said sharply, "I'm sorry you feel this way." Evelyn offered a small smile. "No, you're sorry I stopped accepting less than I deserve." Karen paused at the door. "Greg really is worried." "He should be," Evelyn said gently. "Not because I'm gone, but because I'm not coming back." The door closed softly behind her. Evelyn stood there for a long moment, her hand resting on the knob, the air still buzzing from the words that had filled it. Then she turned, walked back to the kitchen, folded the laundry, lit another candle, poured another cup of tea. That evening, the phone rang once more. "Greg." She let it ring, not out of cruelty. Saturday morning arrived with a soft drizzle tapping against Evelyn's windows. The sky was a flat, quiet gray, the kind that made everything seem slower, more thoughtful. She woke up without an alarm, without obligation. The house was still the way she liked it now. Peaceful, honest. She made breakfast for one, eggs, toast, and a little jam she'd made last summer from backyard plums. As she sat at the kitchen table, her eyes drifted to the photo of her and Emma on the fridge, taken 2 years ago at the Botanical Gardens. Emma's head resting on her shoulder, both smiling, neither of them performing for anyone. Her phone lay face down beside her. She didn't reach for it. At noon, the doorbell rang again. A gentle chime, not rushed, not insistent. This time it was Emma. No surprise, no warning, just her. Her hair was a little damp from the rain, her cheeks flushed pink from the cold. She carried a tote bag and a paper-wrapped bundle of flowers, pale yellow tulips. "Hi," she said, smiling. "Hi, sweetheart." Emma stepped in without needing permission. She hugged Evelyn tight, a kind of hug that had no explanation behind it, just understanding. "I had a feeling you might need some company," Emma said, slipping off her coat. "I always do better when you're here." They sat in the living room, sipping tea, the tulips already tucked into a vase. Emma curled her legs under her on the couch like she had when she was younger. Evelyn sat beside her, calm, grounded, complete. "Dad knows about the trust now," Emma said softly. "He called me last night." Evelyn didn't flinch. "What did he say?" "He asked if I manipulated you. Said this wasn't like you, that you must be confused." Evelyn let out a slow breath. "Of course he did." Emma's voice wavered. "I told him I didn't do anything but listen, that I didn't even know about it until after. But he didn't believe me. He said I changed you." Evelyn turned and looked her in the eye. "You didn't change me, Emma. You reminded me who I was before I disappeared." Emma blinked back, sudden tears. "He said he's coming. Said he wants to talk." Evelyn nodded once. "He's welcome to knock. But he should understand something. I'm not waiting at the window anymore." Emma reached for her hand. "Are you ready for that?" "I've been ready for years," she said. I just didn't know it." They sat in silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. Then Evelyn added, "He'll be angry. Hurt maybe. But he's not the child anymore. And I'm not the lifeboat." Outside, the rain had slowed to a mist. The light through the window made everything seem softer, more patient. Around 3 p.m., Evelyn's doorbell rang again. Emma's hand tightened slightly around her mug. Evelyn stood up, calm and unhurried. She opened the door. Greg stood there. His coat was too thin for the weather. His eyes looked tired, unsure. He had a folder in his hand, full of papers he probably thought would prove something. That things had been a mistake, a misunderstanding. That money should be about fairness, about family. But it wasn't. It was about value, about who gets seen. He didn't step inside. He stayed on the porch, looking smaller than Evelyn remembered. "Mom," he said, "can we talk?" Evelyn stood in the doorway, not moving. "We're already talking." He glanced behind her, as if expecting Karen to appear or Emma. When he didn't see either, his eyes flicked back to her. "This thing with the trust, this isn't you. I don't know what's gotten into you, but—" "Greg!" she interrupted, gently but firmly. "Stop." His mouth stayed open, ready to argue, but her voice was steady. "You forgot me," she said. "Not once. Not just this holiday, but for years. You took. You dismissed. You assumed. And now that I've stopped bending, you think I'm broken. I never meant. You never saw me." Greg's jaw tensed. "I was busy. I had a family. I thought you were okay." "I was quiet," she corrected. "That's not the same." The porch creaked beneath his shifting weight. "I'm your son." "I know." "Then why would you cut me out?" She looked at him then, really looked, not as her child, but as a man who had taken more than he gave, who believed her love came with no boundaries. Because I had to choose between being your mother and being a person, she said. And I'm choosing the person now. Greg stared at her for a long time. Then, softly, he said, "You're really not going to change your mind?" Evelyn didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, she said, "I already did. That's why I'm here." He swallowed hard. The papers in his hand lowered slightly. "Well, I guess that's it then." Evelyn gave a small nod. "It is." He turned, stepped off the porch, and walked to his car without another word. The engine started. The tires cracked against the wet road, and then he was gone. Evelyn closed the door behind her. Back in the living room, Emma was waiting, her eyes red, her tea untouched. "Are you okay?" she asked. Evelyn sat beside her. "I think I am." Emma leaned into her, resting her head on Evelyn's shoulder. "I'm proud of you." Evelyn smiled softly. "I'm finally proud of me, too." That night, they made pie together, apple with too much cinnamon. They played cards. They laughed. They watched the rain come and go. No one else called. No one else needed to. Evelyn went to bed with the window slightly open, the cool air drifting across her pillow, and for the first time in a very long time, she fell asleep without bracing for disappointment, but because the silence finally belonged to her. Sunday morning arrived quietly, like a breath held in peace. The storm had passed. Not just outside. The rain had stopped, the wind had gone, but also within. Evelyn woke early, without an alarm. Her body finally rested. The sun filtered through the window blinds in strips of warm gold. For the first time in what felt like years, she didn't start the day with a sigh or a weight pressing on her chest. Emma was still asleep in the guest room. Evelyn peeked in to check, just like she used to when Emma was little and visited in the summers. Same peaceful face, same half kick of the blanket to one side. In the kitchen, Evelyn poured herself a coffee, no rush, no obligations. She sat at the table and opened the newspaper, not for the headlines but for the routine. Her world had always been built on quiet things, and now those quiet things finally belonged to her again. A little after 10 a.m., Emma wandered in wearing fuzzy socks and a sleepy smile. "You're up early," she said. Evelyn smiled back. Habit, and maybe peace. Emma poured her own coffee and joined her at the table. "Did you sleep okay?" Evelyn asked. "Better than I have in months." They ate a simple breakfast together, oatmeal with honey and banana, and shared the silence like a comfort rather than an emptiness. Around noon, Emma pulled out her laptop and a few folders. "I was thinking," she said, "would you want to help me with my final paper for ethics class? It's about moral responsibility in families, the line between obligation and love." Evelyn chuckled. "You sure that's not about me?" Emma grinned. "You inspired it." They spent the next hour swapping thoughts, stories, moments from both of their lives that proved how complex family dynamics could be. Evelyn didn't sugarcoat anything, and Emma didn't need her to. By afternoon, Emma stood at the sink, washing a few dishes. She said thoughtfully, "I think people assume love means we have to keep bleeding for each other." Evelyn nodded. "Real love should never require you to disappear." Emma turned. "That's going in the paper." They both laughed. Later, Emma packed her bag again. Not because she wanted to leave, but because school didn't pause for healing. Evelyn helped her fold a scarf, slipped a few oatmeal cookies into a container, and tucked a handwritten note inside the tote. Emma noticed. "Did you write me a letter?" "Maybe. Can I read it now?" "No," Evelyn smiled. "Train letters are better." Outside, the clouds had returned, but they were high and thin, the kind that don't carry storms. At the train station, they stood under the covered bench, waiting side by side. "I'm going to visit more often," Emma said. "Not just when things fall apart." "I'd love that." Emma looked at her, face serious now. "You're not alone anymore. You know that, right?" Evelyn didn't answer with words. She just held her hand. That was enough. When the train pulled in, Emma climbed aboard with a promise and a smile. She waved from the window as it rolled away. Evelyn didn't cry. She didn't ache. She just stood there, watching the steel disappear into the horizon, her heart full in a way that had nothing to do with anyone else's permission. Back home, the house welcomed her with quiet again. But now it didn't feel hollow. It felt chosen. It felt earned. She sat down at the kitchen table, opened her yellow notepad again, and began a new page. At the top she wrote, "What I keep." And beneath it she listed, "Mornings without apology." Emma's laugh. "Silence that heals instead of hides." Boundaries without guilt. My name written in my own hand. One place setting when needed. Two when wanted. No more folding myself into rooms that shrink me. No more invitations wrapped in expectation. No more apologies for finally choosing myself. That evening, Evelyn received another call from Greg. She didn't answer, but this time, she didn't even feel the need to check what he'd said, because nothing he could say now would unmake what had already been made clear. Instead, she called Mr. Altman. "I've decided," she told him. "I want to write one more clause. Just a final note." He paused. "Of course. Go ahead." "It's not legal," she said. "Just a statement. I'll attach it to the trust documents." Evelyn took a breath and spoke softly into the phone. Let it be known, this wasn't done out of anger. It was done to protect what's still whole. "I gave. I forgave. I asked for nothing, and was treated like I was nothing. All of this is my answer, and my peace." Altman was quiet, then said, "That's the clearest thing I've heard in a long time." After she hung up, Evelyn poured herself a small glass of wine. She walked out onto the porch, the sky a soft navy above, the air crisp and clean. And then, for the first time in years, she did something unexpected. She laughed. Not loud, not bitter, just a small, surprised laugh, the kind that rises when you realize you've made it through something you thought would break you. She was still here, and for once that was enough. The following Sunday began like any other, but Evelyn knew, deep down, it wasn't ordinary at all. It marked the beginning of a new season in her life, not one ruled by other schedules or expectations, but one shaped entirely by her own rhythm, her own breath, her own terms. She brewed her coffee slower that morning, savoring the sound of it filling the pot. The smell reminded her of the mornings long ago, when she'd get up before everyone else just to make sure breakfast was warm, lunch boxes were packed, and coats were zipped before anyone even realized she had been up. But now, the silence wasn't waiting to be broken. It was hers. After breakfast, she walked to the edge of her garden, a little rectangle of earth she'd mostly ignored for years. The soil looked tired, like it had waited for attention too long. She knelt slowly and pressed her hands into the dirt. Not to plant anything yet, just to feel it, to remind herself that life still came from things left untended, if someone was willing to return. That afternoon, a card came in the mail. Emma, of course. The front was simple, a small watercolor of two hands clasped together. Inside, in Emma's familiar handwriting, "For everything you gave me, Nana. Your stories, your strength, your softness. But most of all, for showing me that being quiet doesn't mean being invisible. I see you, and I love you." Evelyn read it twice. Then she placed the card on the mantel, next to the old photo of her holding baby Emma. And for once, she didn't look at the photo with longing, but with pride. She had been there. She had mattered. Not because of money, not because of meals cooked or favors granted, but because she had loved, and finally she had loved herself back. Later that day, Evelyn sat with a pen and fresh paper. No yellow pad this time, just a clean white sheet like a blank chapter. At the top she wrote, "What I know now." Then, beneath it, "You are not selfish for asking to be seen. Silence is not the same as peace. Family is not built by obligation, it's built by care. You can give and give and give. But if you vanish in the giving, it's not love, it's loss. The people who truly love you will never need to be reminded you exist. Sometimes walking away is not betrayal. It's survival. Saying no is the kindest thing you can do for yourself. You can grow back after being forgotten. And most of all, you are allowed to choose yourself, even if it disappoints the ones who never chose you. She didn't sign it. She didn't need to. That night, Evelyn lit a candle. Not for anyone else, no vigil, no statement. Just a quiet flame for herself. A symbol, a promise. As the house settled into its nighttime hush, she looked around at the furniture she chose, the photographs she kept, the silence that no longer hurt, and smiled. Outside, the moon hung low, wide and golden, like it was watching her with approval. The tulips Emma brought still stood tall by the window, a few petals now curling but still bright, still beautiful. Evelyn sat by the fire, a blanket over her legs, and picked up a book, not to escape but simply to enjoy. The kind of reading you do when your mind is finally quiet enough to hear the words. And as the final ember in the hearth flickered softly, Evelyn closed her eyes, not in exhaustion, not in loneliness, but in peace, because after all these years, she had stopped chasing seats at tables that forgot her name. She had built her own table, and she was no longer waiting to be invited. She was already home. Moral lesson: choosing yourself isn't abandonment, it's self-respect. When those you love forget your worth, it's not wrong to remind them with your absence. Silence can heal where words have failed, and love, real love, does not make you small. It holds space for you, even when you ask for more.